Have you ever seen the show The Ozarks?
No, I haven't, but it's been on, like, my watch list.
Yeah, on Netflix. So I have never seen it myself, but I know from what I have observed in the grand scheme of things, I didn't know that the Ozarks was a real place that you can go and visit. It's essentially a group of mountains. So it's like kind of the Rocky Mountains in a way. It's 300 miles in length and 200 miles in width. It goes across Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Illinois, with the majority being in Missouri. And essentially, what it looks like is there are lanes where you have valleys, steep hills, or it's just dissected and turned into these ancient rocks. There's a whole bunch of sparkling springs, waterfalls, caves, lakes, caverns, and sinkholes. And this is all set within the show Ozarks, from what I understand. And the show is all about a financial advisor who drags his family to the Ozarks where they need to launder money in order to appease a drug boss. And notably, in the show, it's a place of mystery, I would say, as far as the setting goes, because the Ozarks are so massive. To understand what I'm going to be talking about today, I just want to talk about a place called Springfield during the early 1990s. This city was a hub for Missouri, and it was a region characterized by its unique duality. There was a deep, quiet, religious, suburban peacefulness that was also in tangent with this eerie hush of the woodlands around it. You know, sometimes you would be enjoying life in the burbs, and then all of a sudden you would hear screams coming from the woodlands. Was that a kid or was that something else? The Ozarks are very vast, and because of that, there's a lot of hiding places. There's places to be hidden and not a lot of places to be found. It is a geological landmark that historically has complicated law efforts in finding missing persons cases. At the time, Springfield was a community where teenagers spent weekends roller rinks or browsing the Battlefield Mall, as it was called. It was essentially much like you would see in these American sitcom or TV shows where graduation was this huge deal, going to grad, and it was exactly like you see in the movies. It was a huge rite of passage into adulthood. But there was a sudden removal in the 1990s of three women from a suburban home that shattered the local perception of safety and introduced a lingering trauma that's still present to this day, which is only exemplified by the tattered and faded yellow missing persons posters that still hang in the city to this day. Today, we're going to be talking about the Springfield cold cases. Hi, and welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. My name is Kira, and with me is Jen. On our podcast, we talk about cases that we find interesting or true events in real life that we think are prevalent to talk about. We try to communicate everything with as much historical accuracy and facts as we can find, but all our sources do come from the internet and occasionally some in person. So take everything with a grain of salt. We try our best to give you the most accurate information. But if we got anything wrong, you're more than welcome to add to the conversation in the comments. We'd love to hear about it. And with that being said, let's get into it. The victims spanned two generations, which was pretty complex in order to find these missing people. There was Sherrill Levitt, who was a 48-year-old mother and professional cosmetologist, while her daughter, Susie Streeter, who was 19, and Susie's friend, Stacy McCall, who was 18, were both celebrating their high school graduation. Cheryl was described as 5 foot. She was very small, or at least, small for a woman. She was 110 pounds, bleach blonde, with curly hair, brown eyes, and she had freckles that danced across her neck and chest. She was very much a woman of habit. She was a single mother, and in order to combat some of the stress of this, she was also a chain smoker. Her daughter, Suzanne, she was 5'2", 102 pounds. Also bleach blonde with straight hair and brown eyes. She had a scar on her right forearm as well. And she had just graduated from Kickapoo High School on June 6, 1992. And just like her mother, she wanted to follow her footsteps and go into cosmetology. Her friend Stacy was 5'3", 220 pounds, with dark blonde hair, with her ends being very lightened. Everyone had a cosmetologist that was close to them, so you got that bleach in your hair. She had blue eyes and a dimple in her chin. She'd also graduated on June 6th, and she had chronic migraines. Sherrill had recently moved into her home at 1717 East Delmar. It was a modest one-story home located near the busy Glenstone Avenue. Susie had also recently moved in with her mother in the spring of 1992, the same year they graduated. And the two were in the process of making the house a home. Cheryl's activity was before she disappeared. She frequently talked about painting and varnishing and more in her bedroom. Stacy was a incidental guest that day, having last minute changed her plan to come over to Suzanne's house, as at a different friend's house there was too many people. This was very much a wrong place at the wrong time for Stacy, as investigators suspect the targeted abduction was likely aimed at Sherrill or Suzanne, with Stacy becoming a victim of opportunity or a witness who needed to be eliminated. During their final hours, there was a lot of appearances where they were able to see the family on June 6th. This all kicked off with the graduation, and as there was a transition from this very public setting into the private home, there was a 6-hour period where they could have gone missing. At 4 p.m. on June 6th, Suzanne and Stacy participated in their graduation ceremony at the Hammons Student Center on the campus of Southwest Missouri State University. Sherrill attended the ceremony to watch her daughter graduate. Following the formal events, the girls went their separate way for family dinners. Stacy had taken photograph with her graduation cake and received a Cocker Spaniel puppy as a gift. Suzanne also took photographs at the Delmar residence with her friend Nigel Kenny before heading back out for the evening's festivities. The original plan involved Suzanne, Stacy, and their friend Janelle Kirby to drive to a motel in Branson, Missouri, in order to stay the night and visit the Whitewater Park the next morning. However, Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, intervened and said that maybe this late night drive to Branson wasn't the best idea. She was really afraid of getting into a car accident at night, and there could have been potential alcohol users on the road. Everyone had graduated in their town, and there could have been some drunk drivers. So because of this, Stacy decided to keep safe and diverted her night in order to stay with Suzanne. Throughout the late evening, Suzanne and Stacy attended several parties. At approximately 10 p.m., Stacy called her mother to update her on her plans, stating that they were staying at the Springfield area rather than driving to Branson. The girls were last seen at a graduation party at the home of Michelle Elder. The gathering was broken up by the Springfield police at 1:50 a.m. Further events go like this. At 11:15, Sherrill spoke on the phone with a friend about painting. At 1:50, Susie and Stacy left the graduation party after the police crashed the party. At 2 a.m., the girls returned to Janelle Kirby's house in Battlefield, but it was too crowded. So at 2:15, Suzanne and Stacy, I'm going to say Susie a lot, probably. Her full name is Suzanne, but Susie was her nickname. So Suzanne and Stacy departed first Suzanne's house, and they were seen leaving in separate vehicles. And then we have the 6-hour period where no one saw the family. And that was anywhere between 2:15 and 7:30 a.m. on June 7th. Evidence strongly indicates that Suzanne and Stacy successfully arrived at Suzanne's residence. Suzanne's habit was to park her car in a specific and consistent spot in the driveway, where it was found the very next day. Inside the house, investigators found the girl's jewelry, used makeup wipes, and recently removed clothing, suggesting that they had prepared for bed. The discovery and disappearance happened around 8 a.m. on June 7th, when friends and family grew concerned that the girls had not appeared for their planned trip to the water park. This was a really big deal. They had spent months planning this out. So when no one called or showed up to the meeting, they were immediately on guard. When Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend, Mike Henson, arrived to the house at 9 a.m., they found the front door unlocked and the house empty. And this is where it gets rather unfortunate, as a big element of this case was there was a massive contamination of the crime scene that occurred before the police were notified. Because the girls were expected to be at the water park, initial visitors assumed that they had either left early or were running late. Over the course of the day, between 10 and 20 people entered the house, including friends and relatives who were searching for clues or simply waiting for the women to return. And they had destroyed forensic evidence by doing things like cleaning coffee cups and tidying up the kitchen, or emptying ashtrays that contained cigarettes smoked by Sherrill and potentially a perpetrator, who knows? They swept up broken glass from the porch as there was a light that was shattered, and they repeatedly handled the telephone and the answering machine. Janice, who was Stacy's mother, arrived at the home later that afternoon after failing to reach her daughter via the phone. Upon entering, she was greeted by Cheryl's Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, who was just going crazy, yipping and crying, and it was extremely agitated. Janice discovered that all three of the women's purses were lined up in the bedroom. Very strange. Cheryl's car, Suzanne's car, and Stacy's car were all present. So how were they supposed to go to this water park without their car? Recognizing the impossibility of all three women leaving without their purses, keys, or cars, Janice contacted the police more than 16 hours after the girls were last seen. When the Springfield Police Department finally arrived, the house exhibited a chilling sense of normalcy that suggested that the occupants were moved swift and fast. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no forced entry, and no disturbed furniture. However, things could have changed during the day. Maybe the perpetrator had returned and fixed several things that might have gone wrong. But there were still a few things that were notable. A detailed inventory of the women's belongings revealed that while their purses were present, certain items of clothing were missing. Janice noted that Stacy's skirt and underwear were gone, yet her outer clothing was neatly folded in a room where she had intended on going to sleep. This detail is pretty significant, as it suggests Stacy had already undressed for bed when the abduction occurred. Similarly, makeup wipes were found in the bathroom, indicating that they had both completed their nightly routines. The window blinds were slightly ajar. There were two slats that were awkwardly bent or separated. Maybe the people inside were trying to look on the outside. Like I said, all the purses were present, and Cheryl's contained $900 in cash. So probably not a robbery, as they would have stolen that. And there was a unfinished can of Coke in the bedroom, which perhaps during their nightly routine, they were enjoying a can of Coke and they just never got to finishing it. The behavior of the family dog, Cinnamon, which was the only living witness to this whole thing, he was extremely agitated and barking at the visitors who came into the house, but they were otherwise unharmed. The dog wasn't killed or injured, which suggests that the perpetrator might have been someone that the dog was familiar with, or that the abduction was managed with such speed and control that the dog was a secondary concern. This isn't to say that there was no evidence left behind. The investigation is haunted by two pieces of evidence, which still have this air of mystery about them. While Janice was at the house on the afternoon of the 7th. She checked the phone's answering machine and listened to a message that she described as strange. Due to the technical nature of 1990s voicemail systems and the stress of the situation, the message was erased after being played. Police later stated that they believe this message may have contained a clue to the disappearance. The loss of this recording is considered the greatest loss, especially during these early stages of the first case. Earlier that morning, while Janice Kirby was at the house, she answered the phone and received 2 obscene phone calls from an unidentified male who had made sexual innuendos and used profane language. Janelle remembered that Suzanne had mentioned receiving similar prank calls since moving into the house that spring. These calls raised a concern, though. Was the perpetrator a stalker who had been harassing these women prior to the abduction? Or was the random caller taking advantage of what should have been this empty house? Police eventually stated that they didn't believe that the prank calls were related to the abduction, yet the timing was very suspicious. Some months went on before there were any updates. On December 31st, 1992, several months after the disappearance, a man called America's Most Wanted hotline claiming to have prime knowledge of these abductions. The operator attempted to transfer the call to the Springfield investigators. The caller was lost during the transfer and he never called back. This caller was believed to have provided an initial tip about something later on, which we'll get into. The search for the Springfield Three resulted in a bunch of suspects over the decades, ranging from local acquaintances to nomadic serial killers that happened during the time. One of the more notable suspects in the case is Robert Craig Fox. He was a convicted kidnapper and armed robber with a history of abducting and assaulting women in Florida and California. Fox was living in Springfield and working as a utility worker in 1992. This occupation is significant. As a utility worker, Fox would have had a plausible reason to be in any neighborhood at any time, without raising the suspicion of neighbors or women themselves. He had engaged in a series of cryptic interactions with a bunch of media and law enforcement, and in 1997, he claimed to know the women had been murdered and that their bodies would never be found. As he once stated that he would reveal what happened after his mother passed away. While initially he provided an alibi claiming that he was at church with his girlfriend later recanted this statement, saying that he had coached her to lie. Despite all these things, investigators still remained wary of Cox, often describing him as unreliable, and he just wanted to get this notoriety and he just confessed all the time. There was a specific theory that suggests that the abduction was an act of retaliation related to a criminal case involving Suzanne's former boyfriend, Justin Ricola. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Shortly before the disappearance, Justin and an associate, Michael Clay, had been arrested for vandalizing a mausoleum and stealing gold fillings from human remains. Suzanne had reportedly provided a statement to the police or was also scheduled to testify against them. There's a theory that says that these women were abducted in order to prevent Suzanne's testimony. During police interrogations on June 1st, 1992, Michael Clay reportedly made incriminating statements saying that he wished the women were dead. However, both men provided alibis that the police could not disprove, and no physical evidence had ever linked them to the Delmar residence. In the mid-1990s, there also was a bunch of violent crimes that had risen up. There was an investigation of Larry Hall, who was a suspected serial killer who was active in the Midwest for over a decade. Hall was known for targeting young women and was arrested in 1994, but no direct link was established to the Springfield case. Other individuals, such as Suzanne's brother, Bart Streeter, and a man named Gerald Hanen, were also scrutinized but never charged. A theory suggests that the 3 women are buried beneath the south parking garage at Cox Hospital. This is one of the most vicious rumors that still remains in the Ozarks. This theory was fueled by tips, including the lost call, which further invigorated in 2007 when investigative journalist Kathy Ballard had hired a mechanical engineer to scan the garage with a ground perpetrating radar. And they had found 3 anomalies consistent with soil disturbances or perhaps old graves. This was dismissed by the police department as construction on the garage didn't start until September 1993, which was a year after the vanishing. So if they were building a garage, they probably would have dug up the bodies, is what the police department said. A psychic also claimed that the spirit of Stacy called her to the garage. The police department obviously said that, hey, this is incredible, and they didn't proceed with looking into this. But the anomalies that were recorded by the ground penetrating radar could have been tree roots or construction debris. So hospital owners and the police department didn't excavate this as there wasn't just cause or credible evidence in order to do that. Yeah. And in 1996, a separate tip suggested that the women in their abduction van were buried under scrap metal near Cassville, Missouri. A dig was conducted, and while no van or bodies were found, certain evidence was recovered and sent to our state crime labs. The details of the findings were sealed by a court judge, leaving lingering mystery as to what was discovered there. As of 2026, the case of the Springfield 3 remains active, but it's still cold. The Springfield Police Department has processed over 5,000 tips and continually maintains the file of nearly 25,000 documents related to the disappearance. Officially, Sherrill Levitt and Suzanne Streeter were declared dead in 1997 for legal purposes, but the department still lists all 3 as missing in the hope of resolution. But there's a total lack of DNA, a total lack of witnesses, and a crime scene that was compromised before it was properly analyzed. Janice McCall continues to advocate for her daughter, maintaining that while the case is active, it's not a cold case. In the hearts of the families, there will always be the chance for evidence and justice to come out. The future of the case could lie on a deathbed confession from a suspect like Robert Cox, or the discovery through modern forensic scanning that can penetrate deeper or more accurately than the technologies available in 2007. But until then, the Springfield 3 remains a haunting mystery of one of the many in the Ozarks, a testament to just how 3 lives can vanish like that in the space of a few early morning hours, leaving a community and a nation searching for answer across the decades. And that's where we're at with today's case. Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And this is still an ongoing case, so if we ever hear any updates, you'll hear from us. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.